Greetings and salutations, one and all. It's Robert Phoenix, and we're back for another edition of Sunday Night AstroLive. It is the 13th of October. I'm not on. Why not? I think you're delayed.
No.
It says I'm live.
Okay. Now you are.
Yes, I know. Sometimes you have to do this a few times just to understand how these things operate, because there's always a delay between me and you. See, I just froze. Delay between me. How is everybody? We're back here, and we are going to get down tonight with the Trump and Harris and Walz charts. Kind of one final look before we head into the maelstrom of the election, which is just a few weeks away now. Oh boy. Apparently there was another attempt on Donald Trump's life. So this seems to be at the least maybe a bi-weekly or tri-weekly affair. And they happen so often that I'm not even really, I'm sort of nonplussed by them. Although with Mars going into Trump's 12th house, some of these events might actually be worth paying attention to. Although even though Mars does ingress into his 12th house, we know that it goes into retrograde as well. Eventually goes back into his 11th house and kind of wreaks some havoc there. It's there now. And you can see that with his campaigning with Mars there, he's been making a very aggressive push. And, you know, his 11th, we'll get into Trump's chart. And his 11th house with all those Cancerian planets, whatever you think of Trump, they are uniquely aligned in a stellium of Cancer so that he has the ability to reach the Vox Populi. Like that's always been a big part of his chart, that 11th house Cancer stellium. And right now, Mars is cruising through that area. So he's going to be obviously more aggressive than usual. But, you know, the Mars transits every 2 years. So we're catching that Mars transit in the run up to the election. And we also know that on election night, Jupiter, which has just gone retrograde, will also be retrograde on election night, which again impacts not only Trump, but Kamala Harris. So we're looking at both of those charts tonight. We're also going to take a look at the United States chart as, again, this is an important time for the country. And whatever you think of the election process, whether you think it's real, thrown, fake, phony, selected, elected, it's an important time because it does represent some kind of changing of the guard, however you view it, or whatever vantage point you view it from. So, you know, we should probably take a look at the United States chart and where we are with that chart as it relates to election night. And one of the things that I've been tracking a little bit is I call it Uranus. Some people call it Uranus. I call it Uranus. And I've always called it Uranus. But Uranus is kind of moving towards the Uranus return of the United States. And that's at 6 degrees, Uranus and Gemini. So I actually went back and I looked back in time where we were as a country and as a world, where Uranus was at those degrees. And we'll get into that tonight as well. I'll bring some of that forward. And, you know, that should be really the bulk of the show, which is looking at these. I left J.D. Vance out because he's kind of on a, J.D. Vance is a very interesting character. And I don't know if you watched his interview with Martha Raddatz or not. And she said that it was a complete fabrication, that Venezuelan gangs had taken over apartment complexes or taken over Aurora, Colorado. And it was mind blowing because she said, CBS News because I believe she works for CBS News, asked the mayor of Aurora, Colorado, and he said, no, quite to the contrary. They've just taken over a few apartment complexes. And Vance was like, come on, let's have a talk about this conversation. You're basically advocating, you're basically saying that when Venezuelan gangs take over apartment complexes, it's really not that big a deal. But this is just something that happens all the time. And Trump, President Trump, is going over the top by mentioning it. It's just bizarre how there's this really weird push towards normalization, which of course, if you study Yuri Bezmenov and the basically like the 5 stages of a communist takeover, normalization is a very important stage, because once you go through demoralization, the normalization piece is that this is the way things are, and this is the way that things will be moving forward. There's nothing aberrant about whatever's happening, right? Oh, it's just a couple apartment complex buildings. That's called normalization. Oh, yeah, they have very unusual dietary interests and needs in Springfield, Ohio. That's called normalization. So when you hear these things, you have to be very aware that what they're doing is they're using whatever kind of tools that they have at their disposal to normalize conditions that, and I don't care what skin color you are, to be honest with you, around this question, that most Americans, and I'd say most Americans, but not all, would find absolutely disturbing. And especially if you wound the clock back, say 20 years ago, and you said, oh, go back to the year 2000. And there's reports of multiple Venezuelan gangs taking over hotel apartment complexes in Aurora, California. You hear that kind of news in the year 2000, that's going to get your fucking attention. Like, what? How did they get there? This is really bizarre. Most Americans would reject that outright. Let's say there were 20,000 Haitians that automatically descended upon Springfield, Ohio, and had very strict dietary needs, and that came out in the year 2000. How do you think Americans would feel about that? Not great. Not great. It would seem just completely out of place, utterly bizarre. And in most cases, there would be a mobilization to shut that down, if indeed that happened. Now we're in this normalization phase where people can explain it away, they can trivialize it, they can rationalize it. They can say, oh, well, you have to realize that not everybody comes from the same place or space that you do. And it's incumbent upon you to understand these people, because if you don't understand them, you can't understand them. Well, you know what? You're just creating a problem. Not only are you creating a problem, but you're making the problem worse. So anyway, it was really interesting to see Walz handle that. I said, whoa, let's pump the brakes here. This isn't normal. And the way that you're talking about it is just like, well, it happens all the time. JD, it happens all the time. It was just a few. It was just a few of those apartment complexes. Anyway, let's see who's here. And let's do some. Well, it's been at least a week since we did this, right? And we had the event last week, which is why we didn't do this. It was great. We had such a great group this year. It's a tremendous group. And the way that it worked out is that we had some people there that were regulars, had been there before, but I think there were more new people than there were regulars. Now, that doesn't make them irregular, although I would say that we're all a little irregular. But it was kind of cool in that there are all these new bonds that sort of were able to take place because a lot of the people were new and they were bonding for the first time. And it's not that the quote unquote old guard or people that had been there before were not open to meeting new people and bonding. Of course they are. But it was a really interesting, every year is a bit different. And this year was sort of the story of the newcomers or new people that wanted to have this experience. So it was very, very cool. And for those of you who actually purchased the virtual ticket for Saturday and Sunday, I sent those videos out earlier today. So check your email boxes. You should have them. That includes my lecture, Mario Garza of Symbolic Studies, his lecture, the world premiere of I Sing the Woman Electric with Jock Doubleday, and of course Darlena's talk on Sunday. They're all in there. Thinking about next year, so we're going to do something a little different next year. The next year's event will not be in Kerrville. Okay. So next year, in fact, we were looking at this today. Even though my one time as a attendee on a cruise ship was less than, I would say, what's what we're looking for. I mean, I enjoyed it, but I couldn't really. And look, some of it was cruise related, but it was really more about the circumstances of my life. So I'm willing to give it another try. And we're looking at basically getting on a cruise ship in Galveston and doing a 5-day cruise to Cozumel in Mexico. And I've been looking at the room rates and the whole 9 yards, and also facilities on the ship for meetings, which they have. And I'm really leaning in that direction. So if and when we do this again next year, which we probably will, I'm sort of zeroing in on a cruise ship and leaving out. So you can fly into Houston and then get on board the ship in Galveston. And the rooms are not that expensive. You know, the rooms are, if you wanted to get just a regular room, I think it's about $420 per person for the entire cruise, and that includes the food and everything on the cruise. So, I mean, there'll be costs above that. Obviously, you have to get there, and I'll bring some speakers in, and we'll have to cover the costs on that. And I'm sure that there's some facilities costs on the cruise ship, but I'm leaning in that direction. As of now, there's another location I'm looking at as well, and that's in Puerto Rico. So I'll be going to Puerto Rico in December, and I'm going to check out Puerto Rico so you would just fly into Puerto Rico, and they have hotels there with conference rooms and hotels. Now, if I go that route, it's probably going to be, believe it or not, more money than a cruise ship. So I'm going to price them all out, and then we're going to start early this year, and because with the cruises, you actually need to get your rooms ahead of time. So I'm going to throw that out there. I'm going to put it up on Locals, and I'll get your feedback. But it's going to be one of those two events. It'll be either a cruise that leaves out of Galveston. And the cool thing about a cruise, and I looked this up, is if you were to get on that cruise ship in Galveston, and ultimately you spend 1 day in Cozumel, which would be pretty cool, right? Get yourself a day in Cozumel. You don't need a passport. For 1 day in Mexico, you don't need a passport as long as you embark and then disembark from the same port in the U.S. So for those of you who are passport, for those of you who don't have a passport, you can make that trip. Also, Puerto Rico doesn't require a passport. So I'm looking at locations that are passport friendly, which means no passport. All right, let's see who's here. Let's see who's in the house tonight. We'll do a little meet and greet. It's Sunday night. Hey, there he is, Batlino, DJ MC Michael Cisternino, Ms. Behaving 2, Gaia Dance, Kiwi Land. What's happening down there in Kiwi Land? Cash of the Masha, wife out in Floridaville, so I'm hotspotting. Hey, man, it's so cool that you're here with us and taking time out on your Sunday night to make an effort and be a part of the show. Thank you, Kasha. Aaron Ellis here. This should be a great show. Well, I hope I live up to the billing that I've put together here. Kaleidoscope Kara, good timing. I'm started getting an iron infusion. Need some entertainment. I'll be done by then. Okay, well, we'll be here during your iron infusion and after. Julie Payne, New Zealand sorting has seen snowfall. We got some Kiwis here. Look at that. How about that? We got Gaia Dance and Julia Payne. You guys should exchange some information. Springtime. It's springtime in New Zealand. We're getting some snow. There's Charlie. Charlie. Oh, look at that. We got a little sign up here for today is the last day to vote for True Hemp Science and the Best of Austin. Requires your email address. Hey, give our friend Chris a little love there if you can. Click on through that. And that way you can help publicize and maybe push them across the finish line. Derek Reagan Walls here. Hey, Derek. Esther Swith. Hi, Esther. Are you well? Send you good vibes this coming week. It goes out. Oh, I got some great news for everybody. This is fantastic news. I was actually able to have a FaceTime with our friend Bree in Michigan. Bree has done some graphics and some of the intros for like Astro Dads and Serious Sports. She's incredibly talented, and she got her operation done with her aneurysm. She's got 40 staples in her head. She's on the other side of this thing. And we actually had a conversation, which was, well, if you know anything about aneurysm operations, it's never a given that the person who has that operation is going to be the same operation on the other side. And she is. She's completely intact. She had the great grace to know that she had an aneurysm in her brain. It didn't burst. And they got her into the University of Michigan. The procedure, one of the top aneurysm specialists in the world operated on her, and she's going home, I think later tonight. I think she's going home tonight or tomorrow, one of the two, but she'll be back home tomorrow for sure. So, hey, look, we sent her a lot of love, good vibes, hopes and prayers, and I'd like to think that every little bit helps. So she's on the other side, and I'm incredibly happy because she's a mom and she's got kids, and it's very, very challenging when, we've had our good friend Mark Malone, who's been on the show a couple times. His lovely wife Jill passed away 1 year ago due to this incredibly aggressive breast cancer, right? And so, he's had a very intense year, basically caring for two children, very young, one of whom has, he's got all, the Asperger's. He's autistic, right? This child's autistic. I think he's around 3, going on 4 years old. And, Jill was a really, basically, I had Jill as a client. I got to know Mark because Jill was very interested in him as a husband, as a mate. And so we worked through some charts and everything. And then they met up in Minnesota. He flew in from England, and I got to know Mark through Jill. You've seen him on my Friday Forecast show. Very, very bright guy. Very bright guy. And Jill, unfortunately, couldn't make it, right? So there are these very extreme conditions that people have. And in Bree's case, she made it. So thank you, everybody, for all of your energy that you sent her way. It's a good thing. All right. Let's see who else we have here. Brandy Herrera, Sin City, checking in. I think the Raiders got their asses kicked, didn't they? I think they're done. That even Tom Brady and his 10% ownership stake won't save the Raiders. Dead Wolf Resistance 13. What's going on? Good to see you here. Great contributions, by the way, to Friday's show with Russ Winter. If you haven't seen Friday's show with Russ Winter, highly recommend it. Highly, highly recommend it. And it sort of got me back into this whole kind of German, Russian, Soviet thing that was going on. starting really in World War One, where you had the Tsar basically going to fight the Germans, whom he was related to. Right? Nicholas and Alexander were from the Germanic bloodline, and so he takes troops to go defend the border of Russia at that time. So we wound up we'd never seen this before, but we wound up watching Dr. Zhivago last night. I have to say, it's a beautiful movie, but as far as the script goes, not that great. Not that great. Anyway, check out Friday's show. It puts together a lot of missing pieces. Down the Wombat Hole, what's happening? Down Under is representing tonight. We got New Zealand, we got Australia. Susie G in the house. What's going on, Susie G? Hope your son has been lighting it up in high school football. Rama Lama checking in with us from SoCal. We got Whimsical Farm Girl, Wisconsin. Queen Lisa from Florida. She's still got her feet on the ground. Feet on the ground and not an oar in the water. That's good news. Mary Lee's here from Nashville. What's happening, Mary Lee? Lannis Rising. What's happening, AR? How about the energy this past weekend? Yeah, good energy, wild energy. Good. We had good energy. We've had a good weekend. We had a good weekend this weekend, gotta say. Jackie Delario. Although it's fucking hot here in Austin, it's like enough already. We're ready to move on from the heat, from the mid 90s in October. We're ready to chill out just a little bit more. A little bit more. Glemma Spank is here. Hi, Glemma. Let's see. I miss Cali weather, best in the world. Oh, yeah. I used to work in Redwood City, and the motto of Redwood City was weather best by government test, average 72 degrees year round. But that's an average. That's an average. So Redwood City was that was the best. For me, that was the best weather in the Bay Area. Period. End of story. You're south far enough to miss the fog in San Francisco. You're on the other side of the bay. Sometimes Contra Costa County gets really hot. Redwood City was warm enough that it didn't fry your skin, and it was so warm enough in the wintertime where you weren't feeling, although it would get a little cold in Redwood City, I'd have to say. Let's see, who else we have? A road trip 1981. We know that's Darlene. What's happening, Darlene? Stephen the Jupiterian checking in from San Francisco. By the way, if you want a real in-depth and also very broad view of the political career of Kamala Harris, I highly recommend Tucker Carlson's interview with Harmeet Dillon, because Harmeet Dillon was a lawyer in the private sector in San Francisco when Kamala Harris was bouncing between the county of San Francisco as a DA and the city of San Francisco as a DA, and eventually becoming the DA of the city of San Francisco. So you'll learn everything you want to know about Kamala's legal career or lack thereof in that interview. I highly recommend it. Meow Meow Kitty Poop, there she is, the lovely and talented one. Right there. She's also right over there. There's Bo, Kabuki Theater. What's going on, Bo? Not gonna lie, this energy kicked my ass. Well, we went into this weekend with that Grand Cross. That Grand Cross was hot. Right, it was coming in hot on Thursday. Friday, we're still in that the Moon Pluto opposition. So we're dealing with that Grand Cross energy. It's just starting to let up, like last night and today, really. So that Grand Cross energy was smoking over the weekend. Tondar, what's happening, Tondar? Our guy Steve is here. Zerlith the Immortal. Amy Gill checking in. Who else we have? SL Sully. Been in bed last night. Ooh, migraine headache. Hey. I miss misbehaving too. Not good. Not good. Man, I used to have migraines when I was a kid. Oh, they were the fucking worst. They were the worst. I used to get them a lot from right around the age of, I don't know, 13 to about 16, 17. They were terrible. And there was nothing I could do except I would have to take 2 aspirin. I'd have to lay down in my bedroom and I'd have to turn out the lights and close my eyes and not move. The migraine is the worst. And then eventually they just went away. And I don't get migraines anymore. But there was that period for about 4 years, man. I feel your pain. Loma, what's happening? Green-Eyed Crow is here. We got Olivia, Provorce, Shelly Meyer, Prosperity Now. Prosperity Now. Hi, Shelly. Rand, I am live. Hey, we got Elizabeth Donnell sighting. What's going on, Elizabeth? Good for you. Good to see you. Let's see. Who else do we have? LMM. Or for Leela Sandra D. Yeah, we got Mercury and Scorpio. That's Kamala's Mercury. Did you guys see Kamala as what she did, what dropped into her Jamaican accent? Like, what the fuck? So we should talk about that. We should talk. It's clearly in her chart. We'll cue up the Jamaican accent later. That's just fucking hilarious. We need a good laugh. Harry Bowie. Hey. Interstellar Cosmic Conversation. Patricia. Hey, how you doing down there, Patricia? Are you back online? She got hit by Helene as well. So I hope you're doing okay. I think she's down there in the Asheville area. Carly's here. Hi, Carly. Let's see. The attack is turning out to be fake. Okay. Everything that comes around with Trump now and assassinations, I'm not in the boy who cried wolf phase, but I need something like those 2 assassinations. We'll take the first one. It was very interesting because of the astrological alignments that were taking place, which really put Trump in the crosshairs. We were talking about that time period before it happened, and lo and behold, there it was. We put the Matthew Crooks chart. Basically, the synastry with Trump, and Crooks his son is right across from Trump's ascendant, right? So there's all this high strange. Literally, he's literally across from Trump, which is where the angle is, right? So I paid attention to that. There seemed to be some weird glitch in the timeline that happens after that. And then the one in Florida, I guess that the Mar-a-Lago, like I didn't really pay attention to that very much because it was like, okay, this is getting a little too weird. And do we really want to have to break down every single one of these? And then another one. So I'm not saying it's like Boy Who Cried Wolf, but there's kind of a point of oversaturation. And I would say that the closer, when transiting Mars goes into Trump's 12th house, that's when we need to pay attention. That's a big pay attention time, especially when Mars is conjunct as Pluto, which doesn't really happen until next year. But it does go into his 12th house briefly, and it retrogrades, and we'll get into that tonight. Let's see who else. We have Beth Berry's here, double B. What's going on, Beth? We got a Gen X heart. Good to see you. Divine Guidance by Lisa Marie. Let the guy out. $5,000 bail. Trump third attempt. They say the third time's a charm. Peter Bione. How you doing, brother? Have you returned to your digs in Vero Beach? Hopefully. Cherie S. Hi, Cherie S. Man, I just don't know. I know, right? In Coachella. Lewis Walden, can you give us a real estate update, Lewis? Has the prime moving the needle changed at all? Any action, Lewis? We could use an update. Let's see. Go to I Heart Mindy on Twitter for a different story reassassination attempt today. Okay, there you go. Go to I Heart Mindy on Twitter. Thank you, Scott. I got this shirt at a garage sale in California. It actually has an anime samurai on it. Let's see. Charlie Biloxi, Breezy Biloxi. It's a good night. This sounds like a country and western song. Breezy in Biloxi. It's breezy in Biloxi. Mm-mm. And I got a gal that's foxy. Mm-mm. I got a hot one on my hands, but I got a cold one in my palm, something like that. Anyway, you know the story. Let's see. Can't say Trump stay home now and do lives. Can't Trump stay home now and do lives? Like Robert. Seriously, you can interact more and stay safer. I think he's okay. I don't think there's any danger to Trump, at least astrologically, not now. Next year, that is a different story. We'll get into that. Geez, Gen X, right? Yeah, well, hey, look, it's the stretch run. You got to have drama. There's got to be drama. We need the drama. He's a Leo rising. You got to have that drama. Barbara Boots is here. What's going on, Barbara? Yes, the shirt reminds me of the 60s. Nice. Well, hey, thanks, Susie. No one should hide. I kind of agree with Brandy on that. I agree with that. Let's see. Who else do we have? You call it Uranus and Amelia gets silly. There's a time and a place for calling it Uranus, but you have to pick the time and you have to pick the place. You know what I mean? Timing and wit. They're the twin souls. Timing and wit are the twin souls of comedy. Remember that. Our guy Thor is here. Steve, prepped up. Ain't gonna let no storm take him down. Good to see you, Steve. Yes, you can become a member over there on Locals. And some cool things happen over there, some giveaways. I had a $10 discount off of the virtual tickets for all Locals people. And I'll be doing a supporting members live here probably soon. We are going, not probably, we will. We're going to be broadcasting. Circle this on your calendar, okay? Yours truly is going to be broadcasted on election night over on Rumble, okay? Me and 10,000 other people. So I'm sure that I hope Rumble is ready for this, because it could take down the entire system, right? But I'll be on from start till, I don't know, 1, 2 in the morning. Last time we did it, I think we were on Rumble last time. You might have been on YouTube. What I mean last time, I meant 2020. And I think I shut it down right around 11:30 because I had this sneaking suspicion that things were going to go completely south. You could see it start to happen. These weird little stories started to show up. The power went out in Georgia. Oh, really? Since when does the power go out in Georgia? Right? All these things started to happen. So, like, this is weird. And Bannon, we were watching the War Room, and he had this guy, I always forget his name. He's a great prognosticator. He knows every fucking county in the country. And he's like, full on Trump, and everything is moving in that direction. And all of a sudden, things start to like slowly come to a halt. Oh my God, man, this is not feeling good. So I shut it down. I went to bed. I'm like, oh, this is going to be really weird when I wake up. And it was like, geez, what happened? So this year, we're staying up through the entire thing. Whether or not they call a winner, which I don't think they will, or if they do, it will certainly be contested. The lights will be on. I'm going to be rested up. I'm going to be hydrated. I'll be ready to go. So circle November 2nd. We are going to have station to station, wall to wall coverage on election night over on Rumble. Okay? There you go. Let's see. Who else do we have here? J.D. Vance is on the same astrology transit as Henry VIII. Yeah, well, Vance has got that sun in Leo. Okay, so here's my take on J.D. Vance astrologically. I'll even bring his chart up later. You guys have seen The Devil's Advocate, right? The movie The Devil's Advocate with Keanu Reeves, Al Pacino. Al Pacino plays the devil. Keanu Reeves is his son. So that movie is and I've said this before, it is a cipher of Bill Clinton. Why is that? Well, if you look at the court case that gets Keanu Reeves' character name is Kevin in the movie. The court case that gets him on the radar of the Al Pacino character is him getting a pedophile. Isn't it November 5th? I believe it's the 2nd. Hold on, let me check. I thought it was the 2nd this year. Let me just check. It's a good thing that I have assistants. Hold on. It changes every year, doesn't it? Yes. Let's see. So the first Tuesday is the 5th. So my bad. It's the 5th. All right. So 11/5, that's when we'll be here. 11/5. 11/5. All right. So getting back to my talk about J.D. Vance. Thank you, Joan. My talk about J.D. Vance is, hold on one second, I got to change this now. Is that in the Devil's Advocate, the Kevin character, played by Keanu Reeves, gets a pedophile off. He gets a pedophile off, which is what Hillary Clinton did when she was a prosecutor. But this is not about Hillary Clinton. It's about, well, she's part of it. So she's part of the cipher. And let me just go here. 1 second. And so he's actually the spawn of the devil. Right? He's actually the spawn of the devil. So the Keanu Reeves character, well, okay. So the story is Bill Clinton. I'm sorry, I'm doing multi-tracking things. So Bill Clinton, there's been a rumor that Bill Clinton has been or is the offspring of Winthrop Rockefeller. So there is this idea that's floated in The Devil's Advocate, which is a very weird movie. And we covered a strange connection between Kamala Harris and one of the actresses in The Devil's Advocate. We may even go back there tonight just for shits and giggles. So the Kevin character is again a cipher, a composite of Bill Clinton. And Bill Clinton, being the son of Winthrop Rockefeller, has almost like a bloodline connection, right, with this whole thing. So let me just do this. Hold on. Where are we? 1 second here. I'm having to re-rack some things. All right, let's do this. So my theory is that J.D. Vance is that. Right? If you look at his chart, he's got a sun in the 12th house in Leo. And there's this weird story, of course, about him. You know, it's also very strange in that both Vance and Clinton are Leos. They're both Leos. Theoretically, they both come from the South. And their mothers were questionable people. In J.D. Vance's case, his mother was a lifelong drug user. Well, for a very long time. I don't know where her state or condition is now, but for a long time she was not accessible as a person or a mother. And Bill Clinton's mother probably not a drug user, but like if you know about Bill Clinton's uncle who raised Bill Clinton, like he's like a small time like pimp, numbers runner, maybe who knows, some kind of you know, small time drug. Yeah, you get the story. Bill Clinton's uncle was an operator, and his mother is connected to his uncle and Bill Clinton. It's all very shady, right? It's a very, very shady kind of situation. And I'm not saying that JD Vance's mother is exactly the same, but again, it's kind of questionable. You know, Bill Clinton's mother is kind of questionable. JD Vance's mother is questionable. They're both Leos. They're both from the South. There's this rumor that Bill Clinton's father is Winthrop Rockefeller, you know, because it's theoretically, this is what the elite do. They will cruise around various cities and they will drop their seed, and they'll remember who they dropped their seed with, and they will pay attention to those kids. And who's to say if JD Vance isn't one of them? He could very well be. So when you say he's going through the same transits as Henry VIII, and I'm not sure that's a great thing based on Henry VIII, but what it brings up to me, or for me, is that he's going through the transits of a royal. And the way that he has comported himself over this election cycle has, for all intents and purposes, been incredibly royal. Like he's the one that's sort of risen above everybody else during this election cycle, including Trump, by the way. He's risen above Trump. He's clearly risen above Harris. And, you know, not only did he rise above Tim Walz, but he absolutely buried Tim Walz. Okay, so I got Trump's chart. I've got Walz's chart. I've got Kamala's chart. I've got the U.S. chart. I've got Vance's chart, and that's all for election night. Let me go back through here and just do a quick jump for where we are now. Give me one sec. So that's because a lot of these guys are bloodline anyway. This is how they get sorted out. This is why somebody, you know, Bill Clinton was a bastard. A lot of people don't talk about that, but Bill Clinton was a bastard. And in previous societies, bastards weren't looked well upon, were they? Not at all. Unless, of course, the bastards were what? Noble. They were noble, then they could get away with it because people knew that even though they were bastards, they came from a bloodline. And most U.S. presidents do. We know that. All right, I'm just going to get these other charts up here. Give me 1 second. All right, let's see. What else do we have here? Hold on. Okay, there we go. Okay, we're doing now. We're doing right now. Right here, right now. I'll tell you who killed it. DJ Pebblestone. Lotta at the event. Man, she burned the house down. She absolutely burned the house down. She was so good. We danced till about, I don't know, 11 o'clock at night. It was a good time. It was a party. Absolute party. All right. I'm just getting my charts rearranged. So give me a sec. All right, who am I missing? I got Harris. I got Vance. Let's see, we'll do that. Okay, I think we're good. Okay, why don't we do this? Let me do a little push here for True Hemp Science. So True Hemp Science is the only sponsor of the show besides myself, Robert Phoenix, and my astrological services. So True Hemp Science is, Chris has done an amazing thing with CBD, and he gets into the lab and he gets the best CBD, the best hemp, organically sourced that he can find, and he makes all these amazing elixirs and gummies. And all you got to do is go to truehempscience.com and check out their offerings. And you can always make an appointment with somebody at the shop right there. Contact us. You can make an appointment, find out which CBD product is the best for you. They will actually work with you on that. And you spend $100 or more and type in 15MINS, and you will get a free goodie bag, which has these little droppers of all the different elixirs, plus some gummies, right? And usually with 11th house people, with Chattaria people, you get a little bit extra because you guys have been so great over the past couple of years since I started working with Chris that he's always willing to kick you out a little bit more. Not only that, there's always a $150 free shipping once you reach that level, and there's a 30-day money-back guarantee. So True Hemp Science, your one-stop shop for all things CBD-wise. Before that, let me do this other thing. I'm going to do a commercial for myself. This is something that happened, and I'm pretty proud of this. I have to say, I am pretty proud of this. So let me see if I can just do this real fast. And this is kind of a bit of an advertisement for coaching on my part. I just have to open with preview. Let me do this. And let me save this bad boy. Export as. Let's see, export as JPEG. Okay. All right. This is a testimonial for my coaching. I don't often do this, but I'm going to do it tonight. So I have this wonderful client, and she lives in Arizona. And we had a session, and we really got down into some really nuts and boltsy stuff around her and her marriage and her husband. And the session started off with a certain note or tone, and by the end of the session, there was a different note and a different tone. And one of the things that she talked to me about was her husband's fashion. Right. And I said, "What does he dress like?" And she gave me the rundown. And I said, "Well, you know what? He needs a makeover. I think that'd be great for him because number one, I can tell he needs a makeover. And number two, he's retiring from his job. And so he needs a makeover. Like that old version, his name is Mike. That old version of Mike is over, right? So what I did, I was very ambitious. Like, I don't know too many astrologers that would do this. But what I did is I went through and I found a bunch of like I've got all this Libra in my chart. I'm pretty good with like fashion and aesthetics and design. So I found all these things that would fit for him as kind of a makeover. And so let me show you Mike. So this is part of Mike's makeover. And I'm so proud of this. This is funny shit, but good. And Mike watches the show. Mike, I got to say, brother, you're looking great here. I recommended the hat. She got him a leather one. And look at him. Look how good Mike looks, right? So he's retired from his big, oil pipeline job. And now he's ready to rock. He's ready to rock with the next phase of his life. And that's what you get. a comprehensive model when you sign up for Astro Coach with me, yours truly. Not only do I help you out with astrology, but I give you some life and fashion tips along the way. So there you go. Congratulations, Mike. You're looking fine. Looking good, brother. All right. Let's get into it. Let's talk about who these characters are and what is going on with their charts. So we're really going to take two passes here, and we're going to look at like what's happening now and what's happening on election night. The first person I want to look at is Tim Walz, because Tim Walz is in deep water. He's in very deep water. And we'll bring his chart up here. Then I'm going to explain why Tim Walz is in deep water. Let's zoom in here. Now, I redid Walz's chart. Last time I had him as a Cancer rising. Now I have him as I got him as a Capricorn rising, and I'll get into my reasons why. So let's do this. Let's bring his chart up here. The reason I have him as a Capricorn rising is because Tim Walz is a school teacher, and the third house is representative of school teachers. And I've run across a number of people who have had sun in the third house who wind up being school teachers. It's not uncommon for them to be school teachers. So by being a Capricorn, and he kind of fits being a Capricorn rising in some ways, doesn't he? He looks, there's something very, he's not a very symmetrical looking character. And when you have Capricorn rising people, they kind of, they're not always symmetrical looking, right? There's a look about Capricorn rising people. And it's a very memorable kind of like you remember their faces, right? You remember who they are. And I think Walz is in that, he's in that category, he's in that territory. And he's got this moon in Capricorn in the first house. And Tim Walz says Pluto retrograde on his moon. Let's talk about that. Because one of the things that's coming up, if you guys have been following the scuttlebutt on Twitter, is that there is somebody who is ready to come forward and bust Tim Walz for grooming a high school foreign exchange student from Kazakhstan. And apparently the story goes that Tim Walz, that this exchange student was having a very hard time adapting, and Walz was there all the time. They would go on walks, they would have talks, and eventually Tim Walz crosses a line. Now, this is starting to make the rounds on Twitter. It is very specific. Very, very, very specific. And I haven't taken the time out to, and I know there's a lot of internet sleuths. And this person is going to be a minor. So I'm not sure if you're going to be able to find a record of this person as a foreign exchange student at the high school that Tim Walz taught at. By the way, he was never a head coach on the football team. That's another fucking lie that he gave to everybody. He was an assistant coach. He was not a head coach. He was an assistant coach. Do you have to have some talent to be an assistant coach? Yeah. You have to have some talent. You have to at least know the game. Right? So what does the moon represent? The moon represents the past, which is right here. Right? The moon is the past. And here's Pluto. This is as close as Pluto is going to get. It's at 29 degrees. It's going to go direct. It goes direct prior to election night. So it is got as close to that moon as it can get. So will Pluto in Capricorn retrograde conjunct Tim Walz's moon reveal the secrets of the past over the course of the next few days? Well, clearly on alternative media, the answer to that would be yes. With mainstream media, I mean, you would have to have the Kazaki young man come out and make a statement and have it be, I don't know, what do you call it? Notarized or something like that, right? Like it would have to be like, okay, this is a full statement and it was given under oath, right? It'd have to have that kind of gravitas for the mainstream media to be able to bust it out and talk about it. But we've seen this protectionist, this protectionist kind of stratagem with the mainstream media, because what they'll do is they'll have something. Well, it's kind of like Martha Raddatz. Oh yeah, there have been apartment buildings that have been taken over in Aurora, Colorado, and more than one, right? But she'll play it off like, well, there was just a few, and they say that the police have it under control. But again, when you look at it in the context of everything else, it's like it's a fucking anomaly. But that's what the mainstream media does, and they would spin it in a way where well, this young man was pressured by the political opponents of Tim Walz, or why are we talking about this now? This is obviously, if this did happen, then this would be very painful for the young man to have to come forward, and so they would turn him. I mean, they could turn him from a victim into somebody that they would persecute. I mean, we see this happen all the time. So is this going to occur? Well, the wheels are already kind of rolling here, right? We got this Pluto retrograde conjunct his moon, 28 degrees Capricorn. What else is it doing? It's squaring his natal Jupiter. And where is all this? It's in Aries. You're the reason why by the way, if you have Mercury and Taurus, it doesn't mean that you're not bright. There are people at Mercury and Taurus who are bright. I'm not going to just say out of hand, well, you're not smart if you have Mercury and Taurus. But it's a Mercury that is generally not considered to be a fast Mercury. Even though he's got a trine with Uranus and a trine with Pluto, like you can see how sluggish he was during the debate. Like he couldn't keep up. In a lot of ways, that's Mercury in Taurus. Right. So that's not what I'm talking about here. What I'm talking about is this Pluto square with Jupiter. And these Aries planets, what do they represent? They represent male energy. Aries is male energy. So this Jupiter moon square, I mean, I talk about how Neptune squares can be connected to, especially with Mercury, connected to lying and prevarication, whether it's a story you're telling yourself or a story somebody's telling you. Like it's a really big part of the Mercury Neptune square. Jupiter squares can also be related to overstating things. So would it be out of pocket for Walz to overstate things and lie? No, he's done it quite often. And he has a Mercury-Jupiter conjunction. But they are in different signs. His Mercury is in Taurus, which is theoretically grounded, just the facts, man. I mean, that's really how Mercury in Taurus is supposed to operate. Facts, figures, using examples that are solid and grounded. But with the Jupiter conjunction, there's a tendency to conflate speech, to conflate ideas. And then you throw in that square with the moon, you've got a Jupiter moon square and a Mercury moon square. And boy, Tim Walz is dancing. He's doing a very awkward dance with the truth. And it's different than like a Neptune moon, a Mercury square, right? A Mercury Neptune square will say to you, I am going to do X. right? I'm going to do X, or I promise I will never do X. And then what happens? They will go back on their word, and and you believe them, and you say, oh, well, you said you weren't going to drink again, or you weren't going to smoke again, or whatever, or you weren't going to view porn again, or whatever those things were. But there's usually a going back on that with a Mercury Neptune square. So the person saying it is going to go back on it, or the person with a Mercury Neptune square who's the recipient of it and accepts and agrees that that person says, I will never do this thing again, and they do. There you go. That is really how Mercury Neptune square will work. It is the inability to live up to agreements and to be able to say one thing and do another thing, or to hear one thing and then have the person who's telling you that thing do something else. That's different than this. This is about overstating, which is very different. So Tim Walz is an overstater. That's what Jupiter does. It makes everything bigger, right? When he talks about something, like how many times has he fucking overstated things? Yeah, I was in Tiananmen Square. No, you weren't. You weren't in Tiananmen Square. You overstated it. Like he's overstated everything. And I wouldn't call Tim Walz a liar, even though those are lies. He's in a special category. Like he's in this category where if you've ever run across people who embellish their lives in order to make them more important to you or other people, he's in that category. He's an embellisher. And why does he have to embellish? It's because the real Tim Walz story is not a very good one. So he's done this all of his life. I guarantee you, he didn't start doing this when he graduated from teachers college, or he didn't start doing this when he was in Italy and decided that he wanted to tap out and come back to the United States and run for Congress. He's been doing this all his life. He clearly did it then. Like this is something that Tim Walz has always done. He is an embellisher. He is an over embellisher. Hence the Jupiter-Mercury conjunction. Yep, it's 5 degrees, and then you've got +2, right? So it's a 7-degree conjunction. It's there. And again, what does Jupiter square Moon do? Over embellishes, right? It over embellishes. The Moon is the past. So here we go. Pluto is coming home to roost. It's going to be very interesting to keep an eye on Tim Walz over the next few weeks as we move into the very deep part of the election cycle. Will these accusations of him grooming a young man who is a foreign exchange student, will they stick? I don't see. Look, based on Walz and what I've seen of him, what you've seen on him, he's a world-class creep. And we know that a lot of these people are in positions of power because they are compromisable. And Tim Walz is highly compromisable. Highly, highly compromisable. So this is critical right here. Boom. Saturn is going to come up and conjunct his. He and Kamala have Chiron at the same degree, by the way. You know, he and Kamala are born in the same year, and they are opposites, right? Kamala is, I believe, 27 degrees, 28 degrees, Libra. We'll look at her chart. And Walz is on the other side of the chart. He's an Aries. So it's an interesting coupling astrologically because, as you know, male-female connections through other signs or opposite signs are actually pretty good, right? So where's the sun today? Well, the sun today is at 20 degrees, and I would say this rumor broke, maybe on Friday. So we have Sunday, Saturday, and then Friday. So that's 3 degrees minus 20. That's 17 degrees. So the rumor broke in a sun-sun opposition to Walz. Sun-sun opposition. Chiron will not go back to his sun. I think Chiron goes to retrograde to 19. That's as far back as it goes. But what's also interesting is the true node. And he's got his Mars at 6, and the transiting true node is currently at 6. So what did we see over the weekend? We saw this numbnuts try to fire a shotgun. Have you guys seen this at all? It is so fucking comical. It is so fucking comical that, hold on, where are we going here? Oops, Tim Walz. First of all, apparently his gun was illegal because it chambered too many rounds. Second of all, it looked like he never fucking loaded a shotgun in his life. Never. It's incredibly embarrassing. Oh yeah, this is Benelli, and I got it when we did a lot of trap. He's the most awkward fucking human I've ever seen. This guy's incredibly. It's like you don't know how to shoot a gun. You do not. You don't know how. You don't know what you're doing. So it's interesting with the true node, because a lot of times when you get a true node conjunction with a planet, we'll think, oh yeah, right, yeah, this is really good. This is a good transit because it kind of opens up that Mars. Like Tim Walz can really lean into his Mars now. He can show America that he's got this hardcore Mars. He can go out there and he's got a gun and he knows how to fight. Right? This is really what's happening with his chart. But he also has this in conjunct with Mars and Uranus. And what does that mean? I mean, sometimes shit is going to go wrong. Uranus is not always your best friend in an in conjunct. I'm really surprised he didn't blow his face off. Like he could have gone full on Dick Cheney. He could have been Dick Cheney and the guy that Dick Cheney shot. I wouldn't be surprised. It's very awkward. Very, very awkward. And he has these two in conjuncts. Mars in conjunct Uranus. Like, dude, you don't even know what the fuck you're doing. And you're in violation of law. It's supposed to bring out the Mars-like aspects in Tim Walz. And what does it really do? It winds up bringing out really what's going on in the back end, the in conjunct. It's like publicity gone wrong. I mean, who watches it and says, oh yeah, we trust this guy? If you're on the left, you're kind of going like this. You're sort of looking away because anybody that has a scintilla of self-awareness on the left knows that they're doing that to demonstrate to people who are on the fence with Tim Walz that he's actually a man and he knows how to fire a gun and that you can trust him even if you can't trust Kamala, and it backfired. And if you're one of those people on the left, you know that what he's doing is he's pandering. Tim Walz is pandering, which I think is probably a thing that Tim Walz, a quality. It's not really a quality. We would call pandering a quality, but it is a quality that he's probably more used to than not. He seems like he's got some kind of deep pandering tendencies. And then over here, right, he has the Neptune in conjunct with the sun. Now, I think this one is really problematic. Like the Uranus in conjunct with Mars is problematic. We just saw it, right? We just saw it. Where's Venus? Venus is at 24 Scorpio. So what is around 20, 21, 22 earlier in the week? Mercury's going to be there in how many days? In Oh, it's still Mercury's still in Libra. Yeah, Mercury's in Libra, 28 degrees. So it's not going to be there for another, 12, 15. It's not going to be there for another 19 days, which puts us right around November 1st, right around there. We have Mercury coming in on his Neptune and hitting that in conjunct with the sun. I mean, by that time, there's going to be all kinds of mail-in ballots. So Tim Walz is on the clock here. He's on the clock because that Mercury, when it hits Neptune, will, in my estimation, will be exposing for him. There will be some kind of an expose. And, it could happen also when, again, I don't know what his birth time is. I just rearranged his chart. I rectified it to make him a Capricorn rising, which puts his sun in the third house because, again, he's a school teacher, and that's a good placement for it. Yeah, I think because we can't really depend on the midheaven, so it's really from here. That's basically 19 degrees. That's 19 days from now. That gets us to 7 days is the 20th, 10 days is the 30th. That gets us a couple days before election night. And by then, everything is kind of locked in amber, So he may slide through this with Mercury coming in just after the fact. But these inconjuncts in his chart are not good. And again, we saw how this works, right? Yeah, here we go. Let's go pheasant hunting. Yeah. It's Manelli. Got it. What we did? Trap. A lot of trap. Would you want that guy in your hunting party? No, fuck no. There's no way. He'd be a menace to everybody. Could you imagine that guy who's couldn't even load a shotgun? Like loading a shotgun, it's not the easiest thing if you've never done it. But if you've done it a few times, there's only a couple variations on how you can load it, right? You can, it's a pump, you open the pump and you slide it in the tube, you slide it in the tube, you slide it in the tube, you put the pump forward and you're ready to go, right? If it's not a pump, and by the way, if you're doing that kind of shooting, you're usually doing an over-under, so you're going to have a split shotgun, right? You open it up. But in this case, it looks like he's just feeding the shells into the tube. It's not rocket science, Tim. Okay. This is a guy that was a soldier. If you're a soldier, would you want that guy with you in the trenches who supposedly is from a part of the world where they go duck hunting and goose hunting and pheasant hunting? And for all intents and purposes, it looks like he's never fired a shotgun in his life. There it is. It's the true node on Mars. Right there. And then Saturn next year, just like for Kamala, is going to hit his Chiron. So they're both going to go through this Saturn Chiron crisis together. So we could talk about that now with Walz and address that. And I would say that would be a major test of his authority. A major test of his authority. And Kamala as well. So this thing can go in so many different directions. So many different directions with them. And I'll get into some, because it almost feels like we're living in a multiverse. And there's all these different potentialities and realities that are part of what can happen. So in the case of Walz and Harris, who both have Saturn, we both have Chiron very close, the same degree in Pisces, that the Saturn conjunction would be a crisis. I think Harris might be a little bit earlier. We'll do Harris's chart next. Might be a crisis in their leadership, meaning that, let's say in one of these timelines and parallel realities, we go into a Harris Walz presidency. That could be challenged with Saturn conjuncting their Chiron. Like it's scandal that rears its ugly head. That's what I'm thinking, right? So if for whatever reason Harris and Walz wind up getting elected, and right now, based on a lot of the polling, it seems like Trump is really pulling ahead with Harris, and it's not really looking good for Kamala. But we know what kind of world we live in, where everything isn't as it seems. So, and I talked about this a couple of weeks ago, that we have to prepare ourselves for the possibility of a Harris-Walz presidency. It's not out of the question. If that is the case, and they both have Saturn conjuncting their Chiron, then I think that there is a problem that arises with their leadership because they both share the same Chiron. And I do believe that there could be a scandal. So look, just because they're elected doesn't mean they necessarily stay in office. But we'll get into that. We'll get into more of that. We're going to leave that off to the side for now. So we're just looking at Tim Walz. And again, I think a lot of this is quite problematic for him. Look at where Mars is. So he and Kamala have some Mars issues with their chart. So Mars currently is at 20 Cancer, and it will, in a short period of time, square Tim Walz's Jupiter. So what is Mars? Mars is male energy, right? Mars is man. It's male energy. And so he has a Mars-Jupiter square coming in. And what is Cancer? Cancer is ruled by the moon. And what is the moon? The moon is the past. I don't think Tim Walz I don't think he's out of deep water. In fact, I think he's just starting to get into deep water. He has very little air in his chart. He's got Venus in Gemini. It's kind of a weird Venus. It's square Saturn. This almost feels like a shotgun marriage to his wife in some ways. And he's got this Venus-Uranus square and a Venus-Pluto square. You know, I think Tim Walz has a very strange connection to relationships. And his relationships are not what they appear to be on the surface. Venus and Gemini, there's always two sides to relating. And that Venus-Uranus square, it's a little awkward. And to me, the Venus-Pluto square in this regard almost feels a little like forbidden fruit. And the other thing, when you get a Venus-Pluto square, it's wide, it's about 10 degrees. It's kind of till death do you part, but it already has some of that with the Venus-Saturn square. I don't think I feel it feels like his marriage is kind of an arranged marriage in some ways. We also have to look at this Venus-Mars sextile as well, right? This is about relationship. And Venus and Gemini, there's two sides to it, and he's got that Mars sextile. So does that mean that he's got a proclivity towards having relationships with two sides of Venus? He might. I would say he does. He's got a very, very odd chart. But it also feels like he's learned how to grease the right palms. That sounds weird in this context, doesn't it? He has a wide trine with Jupiter and Pluto. So there's that trine with Uranus. It's a Uranus trine. It's weird. Like everything with him is kind of like out of sign. It's sort of like, well, you can have this Jupiter-Uranus trine, it's usually good for being able to think on your feet and being spontaneous. And clearly, he did not do that very well during the debate. And again, it's out of the element. Let's say he had Uranus and Leo and Jupiter in Aries. Well, he could respond very quickly, but he was almost always a tick behind Vance or 2 ticks behind Vance. So he has the ability to think on his feet and be somewhat spontaneous. But because they're 2 different elements, it reacts weird and differently, and especially with the retrograde. And I think there's a lot of moments where he's probably looked back and said, I wish I'd done this instead of that. And clearly with the debate, I think it's a big, big MO. All right, let's talk a little Harris here. So again, this is now, and then we're going to get into election night. Okay. She's a Gemini rising, and her true node is bang on her ascendant, right? Like bang on. Now, this is for Oakland, California, where she was born. You know what I've never done? I've never relocated her chart. Maybe I should do that. Let me do that. Let me relocate Harris's chart because she's going to be different in DC. I haven't done that before. This is a world premiere. The relocation of Kamala Harris's astrological chart. Where is she? Kamala. All right, let's do this. We need at least one of these. City, modify. Let's go District of Columbia. It doesn't show up? Okay. Hold on. Hold on. Here we go. Okay. All right. Do the relocation application. And we'll do this after we look at our natal chart with these transits. I'm surprised I've never done this before. Back. Give me 1 sec. Okay. There we go. All right. Let's see what we have here. Oh, interesting. Very interesting. Very interesting. Okay, let's put this aside. All right, let's look at our natal chart, and then we'll go back to let's bring this in. All right. Okay, let me do this. I gotta play this. I gotta play this Jamaica thing. Kamala Harris Jamaica voice. I gotta fucking play this. This is crazy. If you haven't seen this, if you're Candace Owens, you have to pat yourself on the back. Let me play this. You have to pat yourself on the back because she's been going after her so-called Jamaican heritage, which looks very shaky. And this is her on the Stephen Colbert Show. Listen to this. Like, what the fuck is that? Right? Have you no empathy, man? Have you no empathy? Have you no compassion, man? Where does that show up in her chart? No, it's her first house. It is her first house. Right there, Gemini. I think she's got the multi-personality disorder. She's like an MPD. You know, one day she's talking kind of Southern Black, you know, and then she goes into sort of this, you know, kind of more urban sort of Black. And then she tries to whip out this Jamaican patois. Like, that's Gemini rising, complete Gemini rising, where she's playing with all of these different affectations. It's totally bizarre. But that's what you're going to get with somebody who's Gemini rising. The other thing with Harris is, let's just say for the sake of argument, that she's not wearing a latex mask. That's Harris, whoever Harris is. Gemini rising almost always creates this sense of youthfulness in the individual. Almost always, bar none. So Kamala Harris and Tim Walz are the same age, and he looks 20 years older, and he looks about 15 years older, and she looks about 15 years younger. It looks like there's about a 30-year gap in their age, but you can see this with Gemini rising. You get this with Gemini rising. So the big transit for both of them is going to be that Mars transit, because Waltz has his Jupiter in Aries at 28 degrees. And Harris has her sun at 27 degrees. So this upcoming Mars transit in Cancer, especially when it starts clicking in at about 5-6 degrees from now, puts it at 25, 26 degrees. This is when Harris, I think, is at her most vulnerable. We talked about this before with the Mars Moon square and then the Mars Sun square. Like, the wheels could fall off. The wheels could fall off of her campaign, and it could be explicitly linked to Tim Walz and what's going on with him. So the day around that, and again, we'd like to get as specific as possible in terms of days when these things are taking place, so that we're on the record. Let's go here, and we'll go here, and we're going to go here. So we're looking at Mars at about 25 degrees, and that clicks in at it is right up against the election. So it hits 25 degrees on the 23rd of October, which puts it at 0 Scorpio. And then it's going to be exact square her sun and square her full moon in Aries on the 28th and the 29th of October. And for Waltz, that Mars is having the same effect, but it is squaring his Jupiter, which is in Aries. So this is going to be a very, like, if there is going to be, and it's so close to the election, but if there is going to be an October surprise, and it's going to impact these two individuals, I will show you the exact week. It is right here. So there's Mars. There's 25. It could hit a little bit earlier. If we wanted to play like a 5-degree orb, we could go the 16th. But it really feels like kind of a scorpionic moment, right? And the sun is on her Mercury as well at that time. So she's just coming off her solar return, which is I think it's the 21st, although we're in a leap year, so it's a little bit different this year. So she's in a solar return kind of territory right here. And so the moon is in Gemini, and somewhere in here is going to hit her ascendant as well, right? So this is probably, I would say, like peak Harris. But once we come down off that peak, once the sun goes to 28, 29, and Mars comes into a tighter square right here, and especially down here with her sun. Again, this is just mere days before the election, but this is the most difficult transit for her and Walz going into the election. And we'll look at that transit where Mars is on election night. Let me take another look at Harris here. Okay. So I think that's the big kahuna of the transits. Here, 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 here. And usually the moon can be very scandalous. It's more scandalous when it's in the 10th house. But she has moon in the 11th, which is, affiliations and associations and people that she's had ties and connections to. That'll be interesting. Very, very interesting. You can see here that Jupiter is very close to her ascendant, but it's moving backwards and going deeper into her 12th house. Honestly, I think for her in an election year and position, I think it would be better for Jupiter to be direct and be on her ascendant and be on her true node than it retreating and going deeper into her 12th house. The one thing that I think Jupiter could assist her with here is operating from behind the scenes and getting some sort of aid or benefit that isn't always above board, right? Because the 12th house is the hidden hand. So I could kind of see this happening here with Jupiter in her chart. We'll get into election night. And I think election night, Jupiter is what, around, is it 20 maybe? I think it's around, where is that, 21? So I think maybe it's around 17 or 18, so it could be squaring her natal. We'll get into it. But I feel like this is really the biggie, right? Now, Mars will go into Leo, but she doesn't really have her Mars return until next year. So if she gets into her Mars return, if she gets elected, she goes to her Mars return, that could be problematic. Because she has this Mars-Jupiter square in her chart. And again, what does Jupiter do? It overreaches. And we saw that in Tim Walz's chart. There's the over-embellishment. With Harris, it's an overreach. It's to me, if I had to track where Kamala Harris is really connected in with power and ambition, it's this Mars-Jupiter square. In Jupiter and Taurus and this retrograde. And she's got Jupiter conjunct Algol. Like there's that one picture of her, it's kind of debatable, where she's in the Tenderloin looking very much like an escort. And if I'm not mistaken, that picture shows a woman that looks a lot like Harris who has a collar on, right? She has this, it's not quite like a dog collar, but it's like a band around her throat, which is very algal-esque, right? It's very, has a very algal feel. And you know, I had Osiris on the Sirius Sports a couple of weeks ago. We talked about algal, and he brought up something with algal that I had not really explored very much. But he brought this notion of algal up, where if there are planets that are conjunct algal, like for instance Venus or the Moon, in this case Jupiter, that it is very kinky. That was the word he used, kinky. And this kind of actually makes sense in Harris's chart, because she has that Jupiter in the 12th house. It's all hidden. It's, you know, it's deeply beneath the surface, right? There's things like money exchange going on there. Wealth is going on there, right? And it's square Mars in her chart. And you get that Mars and Leo squaring Jupiter, it's a big power grab. This is somebody who's very, very into power. And I don't even think we know the half of it with Kamala Harris. Yeah, there's Willie Brown. Yeah, there's Montel Williams. Yeah, there's Doug. But I think there's a lot more here that we don't know or understand about her past, and how she got to where she is. And I think she has been chosen every step of the way. She has been chosen for this role. I mean, when you see her path, you can only deduce that this is what has been set in motion. You know, she's almost like a bumblebee with really small, like, how the fuck does she do this? How did she get here? Right? Is she just piggybacking on a bunch of DEI hustlers and a bunch of people that are, you know, wanting to throw down with ESG scores, and, you know, she's going to be the May Queen of that whole operation? Oh yeah, she fits the bill. Let's get her in here. Or has she been part of a much longer, kind of almost Obama-esque journey to place her in this position at this time to be in power? I'm leaning towards the second. And it's that Jupiter in the 12th house that really gets my attention around all. It's like the hidden hand. The hidden hand. And again, she has that Mars-Neptune square. And one of the things that we've talked about, or I've talked about again and again and again, Mars-Neptune squares are connected to addiction. Why? Because Mars is the planet of action. It is the planet of energy. It is the planet of will. It is the male principle. And if a person has a Neptune square with Mars, in many cases, they deem themselves as less capable and less able to carry things out. You know, I would say that this gets into Harris's, imposter syndrome, right? Because she has this kind of haughty Mars and Leo, and the stories around her and her staff are, you know, they're not legendary, but they're out there. And she burned through 92% of her staff. So you can get a sense of that kind of Mars Leo haughtiness. She's almost like, you know, the Queen of Tarts, you know, off with their head. She seems like somebody who was never satisfied. And with that Mars Jupiter square, you can see that it's never satisfied. Like, there's never enough. There is never enough with that Mars Jupiter square. There's always this overriding sense of needing more, needing more, needing more, needing more. And then the Mars Neptune square, I mean, this is how it works with addiction. People, they could have imposter syndrome. They could have
social anxiety disorder, right? So they need things to cope. They need things to cope in the world so that when they show up, they can be conversational, they can be glib, they're not afraid of being exposed, right? That's the Mars Neptune square. So they'll indulge in behaviors that can be addictive, and it's usually because they're weak. They're weak. Mars Neptune square, and I'm sorry if you have one in your chart, you can stop it, you can build it up, right? But you cannot depend on anything to get you through moments where you have to face the world or face yourself. You literally have to go cold turkey, and it's not easy, right? So the other side of a Mars Neptune square is you have to find a replacement for either drinking or getting high or popping a Xanax or popping a benzo or something. You have to find a replacement for that. So Neptune tends to be spiritual. So the Mars Neptune square would be you have to find something that's going to do those things that those other things did. However, it's not addictive. So that could be anything from meditation to yoga. Clearly, you have to be dry. You have to have a straight edge. And then when you have a straight edge, you'll grip. So you need to find something else. So you either have to find God or you have to find some kind of practice that allows you to go deeper and say, no matter what happens, I'm going to be okay. You can't just tell yourself that, though. Not with the Mars Neptune square. And she hasn't learned how to do that. And I think we can all agree that she shows tremendous tendencies for self-medication. And that's right here. That's the Mars, especially with Neptune and Scorpio. Come on. Neptune and Scorpio is druggy. It's a druggy Neptune. I got it in my chart. I'm part of that generation, right? I'm part of that generation. All right. Right. So anyway, this is her Achilles heel. It's the Mars Jupiter square. So on the one hand, she wants all this power, and she's, I think, willing to do just about anything for it. Dazed and confused is what I was thinking of. I saw Matthew McConaughey in my head. She's from that era. I'm from that era. Neptune and Scorpio. That's what we did. So she's kind of got the worst of this Mars, Jupiter, Mars, Neptune square. She'll do anything for power. And then when she gets it, because she hasn't done the requisite work to achieve that power, then she falls into imposter syndrome with the Mars, Neptune square, and then she self-medicates. This is how Kamala Harris operates. It's right here. Right here. Now she has this Pluto-Jupiter trine, and she always finds powerful men. Always. Venus and Pluto. Venus-Pluto conjunction. And it's Virgo, right? What do you think she's doing here? She's being very calculated. She's being very, very calculated. Like her marriage to Doug Emhoff is fucking calculated. Her connection with Willie Brown, calculated. Willie Brown is an Aries, by the way. He's like born, I think, very early Aries. And she's got that moon in Aries. So Willie Brown was really like a big time, take her under the wing mentor. But her relationships are calculated. Again, if you have Venus and Virgo, I'm not knocking your Venus. So please try not to take these definitions of these planets personally. We all do to some extent, but try not to. The Venus in Virgo is not the most romantic Venus. It's pragmatic. It's a pragmatic Venus. It's like, what do I need? Who's got it? Where can I go to get it? And especially conjunct Pluto and especially conjunct Uranus. Some of those relationships just look weird. Like they're unusual relation. There she is on the arm of Willie Brown. The fucking guy's married. Well, let me tell you about Willie Brown. If you don't already know, Willie Brown is like Marlon Brando. Like, he'll hump anything, including Kamala Harris, at any time. So it's not like Willie Brown is like incredibly selective. But this is what she does, right? And she parlays these relationships for what? Jupiter, more power, more resources, more money. And then over here we have it's really the sextile between Venus and Neptune. Now, I do believe that Harris, whatever you think of her or whoever she is or whatever she does have a slightly seductive quality. And it's that Venus-Neptune sextile, right? It's kind of magical. It's kind of, it's got some allure. It has, back in the old days, used to use the word glamour, right? And glamour, not in the sense of like a Hollywood star, but glamour was an occult and an esoteric character, right? Glamour was something that you could use to charm people. That was the original usage of glamour. If you had glamour, you could charm people. And when you charmed people, you put them in your spell. So glamour is very much connected to witchcraft and being able to cast spells or to project yourself into the world in a way where you can get people to submit to your will. And I think Harris has this in her chart. I think she has it. It's right here. And Venus in that sextile with Neptune brings that about. It brings it about. We talked about Saturn on Tim Walz's Chiron. Well, here it is up on, so Walz's Chiron is at 16 and Harris's Chiron is at 14. So Saturn's there. And it's going to fluctuate and go back and forth. So I do believe that she's going to have to deal with something scandalous, whether it's now and before the election or after, because Saturn is still retrograde and it does go direct, I believe, after the election, and it hits her Chiron. But for Waltz, it doesn't happen until after the first of the year. This is all kind of first of the year action. And I don't think it goes really well for either of them. Crisis, emergency, and not really well or ready to respond. That's how I read it. Okay, let's bring up another personage here. Let's bring in Trump. Hold on a second. Let me get rid of this. Oh, right there. Okay, we do this. All right. So we know Trump's chart pretty much inside and out, or at least we should, because we've looked at it so many times over the years. And here he is, right? There's Jupiter. You can tell the helium in the Trump balloon is growing, where you can just kind of feel it, like he's everywhere now. He's in Arizona. He's in Coachella. He's here. He's there. He's like, Trump is everywhere now. And you can kind of feel that expansion of the Trump persona, which is clearly happening. But again, Jupiter is retrograde. So it is just starting to shy away from his sun. Just like it's shying away and moving away from Harris's ascendant and going back into her 12th house. Jupiter is reversing, trending back. Whenever Trump goes into an election cycle, it is always weird. But what do you expect from somebody who has a Sun-Uranus conjunction and the true node sort of at the midpoint there between the two? And then, it's got this moon in Sagittarius, which is eclipsed. I remember in 2020, Trump had his nodal return during the election. And I just kept looking at him like, this guy should fucking win this thing. Like, he's got his nodal fucking return. The only thing that I saw with Trump that concerned me was the Saturn opposition that was going on, which happens at 74. And clearly in 2020, he was having that Saturn opposition. That concerned me because the Saturn opposition, you're supposed to do something different. At 44, you hit the glass ceiling. You say, I'm done with what I'm doing. I'm going to do something else. I'm going to take on more authority in my life or whatever that is, right? That's what happens at the first. That's the second opposition. The first opposition happens when you're 14. And you say, hey, look, my parents aren't cool. They're not cool. They don't listen to my music. I can't let them listen. I'll listen to music that, man, when I turn it on, I'm going to chase them away. That's the Saturn opposition. So you separate yourself out from, at least at 14, from where you came from 14 years ago, which was out of the womb. Right? And 30 years later, you're at 44 and you separate yourself out. Hey, I've hit the glass ceiling. I got to do something different. And then at 74, you're kind of like, maybe it's time for me to hang up my spurs. And I use this as an example because most of you understand it. At 44, Tom Brady, instead of retiring, went back in his word, played another year with the Tampa Bay Bucks. They lost his worst season ever. His wife leaves him. He went back in his word. He really should have ended. He stayed at the party too long. It cost him his marriage. It cost him his marriage because he just couldn't let go. I can't, it's like, I got to win one more. I've got to cement my legacy. And Gisele's like, fuck you. I've had it. You broke your word. He was 44. He needed to do something different. What did he do? He did the same thing. And, Tom Brady has a shit ton of money. He just got 10% of the Raiders, right? Like he's going to be fine. He's going to be fine. I'm not worried about Tom Brady. But I'll tell you that by not doing what he did or doing what he did and not following the Saturn opposition, his future could have been much different. Much, much different. What that future is, I don't know. I'm not sitting in his, $3,000 pair of loafers, his Italian loafers. But I think he missed the window. And I think in 2020, Trump kind of missed the window. I kept looking at this, right? Like Saturn was down here, and I kept looking at it, like, fuck, how does he navigate this? Like if he's going to run for president, he's clearly going to have to be a different kind of president. Those were the famous words, if. And looking back on it, I believe that Trump should not have run in 2020. He should not have run. And that's astrological. Bottom line, that's astrological. Had Trump not won in 2020, had he not run, it would have been interesting. And we'll never know because, there wasn't a primary for a Republican candidate to emerge. And if you looked at the field of Democratic candidates, they were incredibly weak. Very weak. Even Biden was a weak candidate. And everybody in the entire media, Facebook, Twitter, they were all gunning for Trump, right? It was sort of like, it was like the Kennedy assassination. If somehow Kennedy's car managed to get past Oswald and whoever else was there were other things that were going to happen. Do you think he was going to get out of that square alive that day? No. Right? There were other things that were going to happen. So I think if Trump had not run, it would have thrown everything off. for the opposition because they were planning on it. And they would have had to scramble. And then the Republicans would have been like, oh, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? Mike Pence is going to be Mike Pence. And Trump could have come out and said, yeah, I don't, I'm not supporting Mike Pence. No, I'm not giving Mike my support. And then he would have had to go up against whomever at that time. I don't know who was around. I mean, I'd have to back engineer that. But look at what happened. He runs. We go into this election thing. We have January 6th, and it's been a fucking mess since then. And I actually had those thoughts when it was happening. But hey, it's over now. Now, that said, we have to plan ahead. Because let's say Trump wins this time around, which is not out of the question, by the way. Let's track Saturn. It's right here. Where's that Saturn going? Oh, we know where it's going. It's going into Aries, which puts it where? In his 8th house. What is the 8th house? It is the house of the underworld. The house of the underworld. And Saturn is going to hit his Vesta at 28 Pisces. It's been there before. You know, the last time I was there, it was there in 1997. 1997. Saturn 8th house transit is a heavy transit. And he's going to have Neptune there. And Saturn is going to conjunct Neptune. And he's going to go through the Neptune opposition. Saturn is going to oppose Neptune as it goes through his 8th house. I see this, and unless they're going to roll out the clones, I don't see Trump lasting forever. And I'd be very hard pressed to see him last through this Saturn transit through his 8th house, because what's it going to do in Aries? It's going to square his Mercury. He's going to go through a Saturn square, kind of right at the end, right about there. Saturn square. That's a heavy square. That goes back to the Saturn opposition, and it shows you, okay, well, the Saturn opposition. What did you do? How'd you navigate that? Here comes the Saturn square. Oh, did you fuck it up? You get to feel the pain now. This is a very critical transit for Trump. Very critical. And I believe that if he's elected, I'm on the record, I'd be very surprised if he lasts more than 2 years in office, either having some kind of a health crisis or maybe even faltering completely. And the reason is Pluto. Right? It's right there. Now, well, it's Pluto and JD Vance, which we get into in a second. So here's Mars right now. And I think in a lot of ways, Mars is favoring Trump. Like Mars on Saturn can be quite good if you're doing something that you're into, right? If you're doing something that you're into and you're putting energy into it, it's like an investment. It's the same thing with a Saturn-Mars conjunction. Saturn-Mars conjunctions are longer. If you're doing something that you're into, a Saturn-Mars conjunction can be very fruitful. You'll put in the time, the effort, and the labor. If you're not doing something that you're into, a Saturn-Mars conjunction can be really restrictive. It's kind of like you are burdened with all of this work and all of this responsibility, and there's nobody there to help you, and it's kind of thankless. And the only benefit that you get from it is being able to say, I did it. I did it. I got through it. I took all of this on. It stretched me. I'm much more capable than I thought I was, and I never want to do this again. Right? That's a Saturn-Mars. It's Saturn transiting on top of Mars conjunction. So here we have Mars conjuncting Saturn. So there's a lot of energy that Trump is using here to what? Press the flesh and get out and meet. Mars in the 11th house isn't always the most friendly Mars, right? It can make enemies. Trump is no stranger to making enemies. It will go to 6 degrees and it will go into his 12th house, and then it retrogrades. So I don't really feel like Mars going through his 12th house is the imminent threat. Like, I'm looking at his chart, like what's it doing at 6 degrees? Nothing really, right? Nothing. But next year, when it goes direct and goes back into his 12th house in conjuncts his natal Pluto, that's a different story. That is a completely different. And we've seen this before. We've seen Mars go through Trump's 12th house in conjunct his Pluto. He's been through this number of times, right? But this is, a bit of a different time now, especially with Pluto. Pluto's not exactly opposite Mars, but next year, Pluto will be about 3 degrees. So it is in an opposition with Pluto. So he's going through this Pluto-Pluto opposition. It won't really completely consummate until his 80s, right? And when he goes through that, he goes through the Pluto-Pluto opposition, he'll live until his 90s. But that's an F at this point, right? That's an F. So I feel like in terms of his energy and the election prospects, if I had to pin one thing on Trump's chart that to me would be promising for his election prospects, whatever that is, whether it's after a prolonged period of time, he's named the president, or whatever, right? It's the Jupiter retrograde, because it almost feels like it takes us back to 2020, right? Where he had the nodal return. And again, based on the nodal return, for all intents and purposes, he should have been the president. This is how nodal returns work. And it didn't happen. So I would say between the two, with the Jupiter retrograde, it favors Trump more than Harris, particularly because Harris's Jupiter retrogrades into the 12th house, and there can be backroom deals with the Jupiter 12th house retrograde. Now, I have talked about what I think could happen with Trump. And I think that the most dastardly plot would be for Trump to win on election night and then have the other side have it rigged up so that it looks as if Trump has cheated, right? It looks as if, it's kind of like a, what's the word I'm looking for? It's a setup. It's a total setup. But it's a setup that's not being done by the so-called right? It's done by the left. Because, again, what happened last time? Well, we thought, okay, like, this motherfucker has thousands of people at his event, and this other guy has about 50. And it looked like a slam dunk, right? It looked like a slam dunk. And then, oh, geez, look what happened here. This doesn't seem right. This doesn't feel right. Maybe because it isn't right. It didn't fit the picture. And that was a huge piece. It was a big piece. But so we know that these scripts don't always follow each other. So if the same script was played out and this time Harris would be the benefactor of the script, it's almost too pat. In Gemini, it would be the reverse version of the script. And in this regard, it would be Trump that would be fingered as throwing the election or being involved in some form of election manipulation, which of course would then make this entire thing get stretched out, which I do think it will. I think it'll be a contested election and America is going to be on pins and needles the whole time. Pins and needles. And if it's not contested at the beginning, it'll be contested in the days to follow. So this is what I see for Trump. He's probably got the best version of Jupiter here, other than Harris, and even with Mars. Like, he has some Mars issues, but he's already gone through some of them. He's already gone through the Mars-Neptune square, right? He's already gone through the edge of the Mars-Jupiter square. He's already gone through that. He's going to have the Mars-Venus conjunction, which is pretty good for just relationships and kind of being, balanced in a masculine feminine way in general. So I don't see transiting Mars being as nearly as disruptive in his chart as it is with Harris and Walz. So I think, for all intents and purposes, I think Trump has the better election night chart. He's got the least amount of friction and noise going into the election. And Jupiter, to me, is the inverse of what happened last time and puts him back into the White House, although, again, I believe it'll be contested. So these are my predictions for Trump and for Harris and for Walz. That's how I'm seeing where these aspects are right now. Well, let's take a look at election night. Before I do that, let's bring in Kamala's relocated chart, which I have not done before, and it was very interesting as I pulled it off the screen there. Let me see this. Yeah, so this is Harris's relocated chart right here. Okay, so here we see her as a Leo rising, which is what Trump is. And then she has Mars in the first house ingressing into the second, and then the moon in Aries in the 10th house. You can see this in her chart. But again, the problem with the moon in the 10th house is, out of all the houses, it is the placement that is the most scandalous. That things from the past can creep up and emerge. It's actually a very powerful placement, especially for a woman, and especially with the moon in Aries. So whether or not we think she's strong or capable, there are people that do. They see her in this way. They may not be me and you, but there are people who see her like that. And then what's also interesting is this dues for Kamala. Remember, Aries is a male sign, right? It is a male sign. It almost feels like she's like this mother superior for all these dudes who are kind of simpy. That's the moon in Aries. She feels like their mother superior in a lot of ways. Her son is in the 4th house in Washington, D.C., which means that she's a resident, right? Like, she's living there. And if we equate this to the White House, well, kind of makes sense, right? So her relocated chart for DC is actually, I think, fairly powerful and fairly formidable, especially with Uranus, Pluto, and Venus in the 2nd house, and using those assets, right? These are all asset based with Jupiter here. Jupiter is up in the 10th house, ingressing in the 11th. So she's kind of more on display in Washington in a lot of ways. When I look at this chart, I mean, I could say, yeah, this could be a long-term chart for her. I mean, this could be a long-term chart. Living in DC, Sun in the 4th house, Moon in the 10th. So if you don't want Kamala Harris to be a long-term resident, and again, just looking at the natal charts, I think Trump's got the edge, but clearly with the relocated chart, getting her out of DC is going to be tough with that sun in the fourth house. So let's hope a little. If you're not into this woman, then let's hope a little October surprise is in store, because it kind of offsets the natal chart with the transits. It kind of offsets that. By the way, if you're asking what is Trump's chart like in DC, it's basically the same as his New York chart because they're so close. There's hardly any difference. But you can see the difference here because in California, she's a Gemini rising. She moves east, and that clearly changes. Now, transiting Mars is going through her 12th house, which is generally considered not a great aspect, hidden enemies. So it's even more critical with this Mars transit now. We saw it in the natal chart, squaring the moon and squaring the sun. Now with Mars traveling through her 12th house in Cancer, hidden enemies, I think there's much more of a chance. Not that there wasn't a chance before. It's like, okay, she's going to take a hit. And let's see how she takes the hit. You know, this is how fights. She hasn't really taken a hit. Maybe she's taken a few rabbit punches, but she hasn't taken a really big. Trump has taken haymakers, right? He's taken haymakers and he's still in the fucking ring. Trump can take a punch. We've seen it. We don't know if Harris can really take a punch, but I think it's coming. And it's coming really during that, like the last degrees, you know, the 25th degree of Libra on. We'll find out what Kamala Harris is made of during that time and whether or not she can get up off the mat. Because one of the things that happens here is that Mars, right, comes in and conjuncts the ascendant in Leo, which again is quite powerful. It's powerful, and I think it's an election night. We'll look at the election night stuff where Mars is, but it's quite powerful on the ascendant. So we'll see if she can take a punch. I think that's going to be the big thing for her. All right, we just want to look at the relocated chart. Okay, so let's do this. Let's get into just election night now. And we're just going to look at Harris and Trump on election night. Okay, here we go. So let's take a look at Harris. And we've already kind of talked through some of these things. So we'll go through here. So again, these are the transits for election night, November 5th. You can see Jupiter retreating even further. Mars is at 0 Leo on election night. That's pretty close to her relocated ascendant. Her relocated ascendant is 3 Leo. And as they used to say back in the day, that's close enough for jazz. So that's actually a pretty prominent transit for Harris in the relocated chart. Again, with Trump, it's not going to be very different because of the proximity of Washington and New York City. They're very, very close. What else is going on here? The moon's in Sag that night, so that means that it's going to be conjunct Trump's moon. That's interesting. That's very interesting. We'll take a look at that. Okay, that Mars is at 0 degrees. It's not really doing anything, right? It's not really connecting with anything else in her chart. And in fact, it's kind of still in that square with her sun. And it's still in that a bit of in that square with the moon, even though the moon is in a fire sign. Mars is by degree still in square. Oh, no chart. Thanks, Joan. Okay. Where are we here? All right, let me go back to me. Here we go.
Let's do this. My apologies. My apologies. Okay, that's a relocated chart. So it's this one. Sure, this happens. There it is right there. Okay. So that's what I'm talking about, right? There's your Mars, 0 Leo. But in the relocated chart, it's very close to ascendant. Just sneaking. Just sneaking. I don't think she has anything tremendous on election night. The sun is at what? 13 Scorpio, conjunct Neptune. Okay. So it's in glamour, but it also is in a wide Mars square. Sun Mars squares aren't necessarily bad. Let me just think about this for a second. Okay, this to me reinforces the narrative of her being cheated. She's the victim. She's the victim of the fraud. Sun on Neptune, Sun square Mars. We're going to fight and we're going to expose the election fraud. Like, so she's this is what I think is going to happen. I think Trump is going to be a winner and they know he's going to win, but they're going to booby trap this thing so that there are votes that look illegitimate. And Harris is going to be painted as the victim. That's what I see here. And there are going to be people who will be angry, upset. We're going to fight. And it's like, well, he did it. He denied the election in 2020. What's good for the goose is good for the gander. I'm telling you. I believe this is how it's going to go down. That they're going to pin election fraud on Trump, even though there won't be. And it's going to throw everything into chaos. That's my sense. So we have a contested election. All right. So that's Harris on election night. And then let's look at Trump on election night. I got about 6 Trump charts up here. Oh, come on, Donald. Oh. Right. That's not the one I want. All right, hold on. I got to do this. Let me go here. And let me go here. I don't know why it's not up here. But it will be here. I promise. I promise. Donald Trump. Where is he? There he is. Chart selection. And let me go back. Oh, come on. Just bear with me 1 second. There we go. Right there. And we're going to get this out of this. Modified data. Other town. New York. I thought I'd settled this. Did you know there's New York, Florida? I did not know that. Okay, so let's go back. Why does it keep going? This is weird. Every time I put it on Trump, it fucking goes back to Harris. Is that a sign? Are we dealing with a sign here? I don't think so. Okay, we got that. And let's do this. So the last time we did this in 2020, I did a tarot reading, and for the election, and one of the cards that came up was the Hangman, and it was totally perfect for the election because we were just hanging there, right? I mean, literally, we were just hanging there. Okay, so these are the transits for election night with Trump. So there's Jupiter. There's that Jupiter. It's at 20 degrees, and this is where he had his nodal return in 2020, but for all intents and purposes, he should have won the election. Even with the Saturn opposition, like it's a weird combination. Like he's got his nodal return, he's at his height, and yet in total Trumpian fashion, Saturn says, hey, pull the ripcord and, exit out the back door. It like these two things were, I don't think they're mutually exclusive. It was like, because again, for all intents and purposes, he looked the part, we thought it was the part, and then the part wasn't there. All right, so there's that moon, right? So the moon is at 21 Sag, and his moon is at 21 Sag. Are you kidding me? On election night, he has the moon transiting his moon. Well, on election day, it's at 8 a.m. But look at that. And he's got Venus conjunct his moon. I mean, to me, this is, of the two charts, if you don't take into account Harris's relocated chart, this is the winning chart. To me, this is the winning chart. Even the sun in Scorpio, 13 degrees. It's in trine with his Mercury and kind of in the midpoint with Saturn and Mercury. To me, again, and there's Mars, it's at 0, right? So it's just coming into his 12th house. It goes to 6 and then it retrogrades. Based on the two charts, I think Trump has the better election night chart. I can't spin it any other way. In leading up to the election, Harris's chart is Harris and Walz. They're the charts that are fraught with the most landmines. And it's Mars for both of them. Trump doesn't really have an issue with Mars. And we're not even going to bring Vance into this because he's Vance, right? He's not even, like, there's nothing scandalous about JD Vance. If there was, we would have heard about it by now. There's the Peter Thiel stuff. There's the Palantir stuff. That stuff is on the table, on the record. Is it scandalous? It may not be what you want. It may not be what you want to hear. It may not be what you want to paint as a future. But is it scandalous? No. Tim Walz essentially grooming a foreign exchange, that's pretty scandalous. And who knows what comes out of Kamala Harris's bag with this Mars square. So again, if I'm just looking at Trump's chart, he's got a Saturn-Uranus square. It's rebellious. And eventually have the Saturn-Moon square. That doesn't really come into being intensely until next year in January. So he's got some things ahead of him. I think the biggest thing, as we talked about, is the Saturn transit of the 8th. But he's not even close to that yet. So again, based on the two charts, I think Trump has the winning chart. Based on his moon, he's got this freaking Sag moon, right? Right there. Bang on. Venus is there, bang on. Jupiter returns to his true node, which is where the true node was in 2020.
To me, these are all indicative of Trump being in the winner's seat. But again, I think there's shenanigans, and I think it's a contested election, and I've already shared with you what my scenario is. So if you had to, if you had to look at the two straight up, again, I'm going to say this, right? With that relocated chart with Harris, she's kind of like a fixture. And even if she loses the election, Kamala Harris, I don't think she'll go back to Southern California. Kamala Harris will stay in Washington, D.C. And she's not a shrinking violet. You will not have heard the last of Kamala Harris. She won't just fade into oblivion like Geraldine Ferraro or Shirley Chisholm or, other people. And she's gone much farther than both of them. But again, that relocated chart's like she's planting her flag there. So if you are not a fan of Harris and you are not a fan of the type of government that Harris and Walz clearly appear to represent, whatever you think of Trump, you better hope he knocks her out. Because if he doesn't knock her out, if he doesn't win this thing, she'll be there. And I think somebody brought up that she would be there for more than one term. I could totally see that. With that relocated chart, I could totally see it. So this is it. You better hope he gets his shots in. And we're going to find out if Harris can really take a punch. That's really the big part. If she can take a punch. Because that punch is coming. All right, let's take a look at the United States now. We got this right. Yeah, we do. So this is the United States on election night with everything. Okay, let me just make this a little bit bigger. All right. So I always find it weird that we have the election in Scorpio. It's like, why? Because it feels so dark and underhanded. If I made up the rules, I would make it the first Tuesday in November. Is that right? No, not the first. No, it's already the first Tuesday in November. No, I would make it the first Tuesday in Sagittarius. Either that, or I'd make it the first Tuesday in Libra. One or the other. So if it was in Sagittarius, you're kind of getting into like, okay, I would make it the first Tuesday after Thanksgiving. I know that's tough. You got holidays, you got snow. It just feels like Scorpio is a weird time of year to have an election because it's so underhanded and there's so much like underworld material that goes along with these fucking elections. So then I would say that the better time for an election would be the first Tuesday in October. I think that would be a good time for an election. In Libra, things are fair and balanced, right? Versus Scorpio, which is, and I get it, it's sort of like, okay, to the winner goes the spoils. And there's this potential for deep transformation with whoever takes over, and it happens. You think that these regimes don't change America? They do. Even the most feeble and weak of the people that have represented this country, in the as POTUS, have affected the history of the country, the arc of our country. Jimmy Carter comes to mind. So I would go with the first Tuesday in October versus November. Anyway, this is election night. And we have, now this is interesting because Pallas and Venus and the moon are in Sag in the first house, which is, I think, good in terms of maybe some transparency, hopefully, right? I think it's good. The sun is in the 11th house, which is better than the sun in the 12th. Mars is very close. What's interesting is Mars is going to hit that true node in Leo at 6 degrees, and it's going to go retrograde. I think it goes retrograde all the way back to like 14 degrees in Cancer. I don't think this is a good election for the United States based on Mars. So on election night, it's 0. It goes forward eventually and it's not that far. You know, it's like about a week later, it hits that true node and then it falls. And then we're back into that Mars Cancer right there. Right there. Interesting. You know, a lot of these planets are very much connected to Trump as well. Mercury's on his Saturn. I believe the sun is conjunct his Venus, and Jupiter, Venus conjunct his Mercury. So you can see how Trump's story, in a lot of ways, is connected to America's story, whether you like him or not. I mean, all those planets, all of his planets are right in here. They're right in the pocket. Also, Trump has Jupiter and Neptune in Libra. You know, they're floating around up in the 10th house in the U.S. chart where Saturn is. So clearly, you know, he's represented. His moon, right, is in the first house of America's chart. Here's Jupiter on election night, and we have Mars here. And again, it's retrograding. So we have Jupiter, what is that, 20? Right there, and Mars at 21. Yeah, it just, again, it feels like, if anything, it feels like something is like catalyzed and lit, but then Jupiter retreats. And, you know, there's that Mars-Neptune, is that Mars-Neptune square? And the U.S. has it, right? We talked about Mars-Neptune. And, you know, I could dive into this easily, you know, with Mars-Neptune square in this country. You know, we've always had a drug problem, with the exception of prohibition. You know, we've always had a drinking problem. Now we've got an eating problem. You know, as a nation, I think we trend towards addiction, whatever it is, whatever kind of gets us through. I mean, as a people, and I think as a nation, I think, again, this is a much bigger picture, maybe even a bit of a different show, but I could see that Mars-Neptune square could be quite exploitative. You know, oh, let's go into Iraq and go get some oil, right? Like that's what Neptune represents. It represents, and what are we addicted to? We're definitely addicted to, and I'm not here to, you know, pound the table for the green economy or anything, but we are clearly addicted to petroleum products. And we have been for a very long time. The country was built on it. Freeways, highways, interstates, sticking McDonald's, you know, or McDonald's was the first, but sticking these fast food restaurants on the interstates, which in a lot of ways also feeds our addictions. And Jupiter's right there on Mars. That to me feels slightly exploitative. It feels exploitative. It feels like the exact scenario I was talking about. The exact scenario I was talking about, where there's a victor, right? Look at where that Mars is. That Mars is on Trump's true node at 20 degrees. Mars in Gemini in the US chart is on Trump's true node. And there's Jupiter. And what's Jupiter doing? It's retrograding. Again, I think this is another example of what I'm talking about. And this is in the US chart. This isn't in Trump's chart. This is the US chart. So get ready. We're going to have some real issues here. Real issues. And do you know the Spider-Man meme? Right? Where there's two Spider-Men, sometimes there's three, and they're all like shooting their webs or trying to shoot their webs at each other. That's election night. It's the Spider-Man meme. Long term, with this chart, the Neptune transit in the fourth house that's coming is very significant. It's very significant. Saturn right now is on the US moon. Actually, it's not. It's US moon's in the Aquarius, 27 Aquarius. So it's not even supposed to be there, right? It's a very long Aquarius. It goes from here to here. So it's not on the US moon. Saturn is right there. No. We had it on the US moon, and that was in February of 2023. The Saturn-Neptune transit of the fourth house. That's going to be tricky for this country. We'll get into that later. I'll do a show on it. Anyway, that's how I see election night playing out here. I think it favors Trump astrologically, and I think there's issues. I think there's big time issues. And you guys know what I'm talking about, right? There you go. I guess we could take a look at Vance's chart since I brought it up. Let me just look at this chart. Where is it? Okay, so this is for election night. And this is just to refamiliarize ourselves with JD Vance's chart. And again, I don't know. Okay, hold on. That's not it. That's it right there. There we go. Again, I don't know the exact. Like we've been able to piece together forensically JD Vance's past. And a lot of it is out there and on the table. He wrote his memoir. There's a movie. There's the connection with Yale, and there's the connection with the Sibley, Austin Sibley law firm in Chicago, the same law firm that Obama was at. Right. Then there's the migration to the Bay Area and Peter Thiel and getting super charged up. I mean, he's somebody who feels like he's like Harris in some ways, only a different version. It feels like Harris, Obama, Vance, they all have these interesting paths that it almost feels like the next stepping stone is put out in front of them so they can hit it. Right? All three of them have that kind of quality about them. But there's, I think, a lot that we don't know about JD Vance simply because he's a 12th house sun. What we've seen with JD Vance has been fairly interesting in a lot of ways. And he's got that Mercury in Virgo in the first house, which I think made him highly effective in the debate. He's good. Right? And he's got that Mercury trining Jupiter, even though it's retrograde in Capricorn, he's got a Mercury Jupiter trine. So he can take a big idea and he can condense it and make it understandable. That's, I think, one of JD Vance's greatest assets. He can speak to the world in a way that is understandable and cogent and articulate. Trump has the voice of the everyman. So he sounds like somebody that the everyman could relate to. Vance is much more sophisticated and articulate in terms of his delivery. And he's actually more effective than Trump because he not only can connect these dots that the everyman can follow, but in some ways he also appeals to intellectuals. Trump does not appeal to intellectuals. Even though I think Trump is clearly smart, I would not call him an intellectual. J.D. Vance is much more of an intellectual than Trump, although he won't wear that, right? He doesn't really wear that. So he has a very interesting chart. He's got Moon in Libra, Pluto in Libra. So, hey, J.D. Vance, he's right there at the edge of Gen X, right? He's right at the edge of Gen X. Gen X, maybe very early millennial. You know, he's right in that 29-degree pocket. And that moon in Libra shows up in Trump's second house, around his Neptune, around his Jupiter. He's going to benefit from a Trump presidency tremendously. You know, Trump's Pluto is at what, 10 degrees? And there's J.D. Vance's sun. It's right on his Pluto. So I think he's the heir to whatever Trump starts here. And keep your eye on that Pluto opposition. When Pluto gets to 6, 7, 8 degrees and begins to oppose his sun and oppose Trump's Pluto, we're looking at a sea change. And again, this is if Trump and Vance literally advance to the White House, right? Vance he's got an interesting chart. The more, you know, when I dove into the 12th house and the 12th house personae, and it was J.D. Vance who really got me to think about it. I'm like, man, there are all these people that are really interesting and are deep and archetypal, bordering on mythic, have these 12th house suns. And lo and behold, there's J.D. Vance. And it feels to me like this is a guy who, all right. And remember, I was kind of down on this guy in the beginning because I didn't like his path. Then again, you look at a lot of other paths that presidents have taken, and they're not always squeaky clean. But I have come to the conclusion that if J.D. Vance became president, he would go down as one of the best presidents of this country. If he became president, people would be having conversations about J.D. Vance in the way that they've talked about other presidents who have been talked about long after they were gone. So I firmly believe this because it's this sun in the 10th house, right? It's the sun in the 10th house. And he's got that square with Saturn, which means that this motherfucker is, you know, he's not going to give up. Right? Sun-Saturn squares are very intense. You know, they're very, very intense, and you have to go through a lot. And I feel like a lot of this is part of his upbringing. You know, this guy was not born on third base. That said, he might be bloodline. Because again, we don't know. Like, there's a story about who his birth father is. There's always stories about birth fathers, but they're not always true. So with the sun and Leo in the 10th house, and you watch him and how he was moved along, right? This guy feels like bloodline. Whoever his birth father was, I'm not buying it. I'm not buying it. And he has this Sun Uranus trine, which is really, really interesting. And he could be incredibly innovative and kind of ahead of the curve. And not just that, but when he was talking with Tucker Carlson in that interview. The way that he used his language was very interesting. He was very conversational. He used the word man a lot, like, hey, man, like that's a word that I use. And he mentioned Trump 4 times. He only called him President Trump once. So there's that kind of Sun Uranus kind of informality. Like everything's cool, right? Everything's cool. Like he has that. And I think with that Sun Saturn square, like the guy's been through some fires. You know, are there some weird things in his past? Maybe in the military, you know, maybe who knows? You know, we could open up a can of K. Greg's and we might be able to go some places. But we're not going to do that tonight. He's got Mars and Scorpio. Like, you know, like there are women who really think JD Vance is hot. Like they like him. And that's Mars and Scorpio. You'll get that with Mars and Scorpio. Even if somebody doesn't really like have the look with Mars and Scorpio, there is a charisma and there's a sex appeal that goes along with it. Now, it is squaring Venus in his chart. To me, that has to do with power. Like, can he, you know, is he going to be a Kennedy? Right? Can he keep his dick in his pants? To me, that's the Mars-Venus square. And he could also be very passionate about certain subjects. Because Venus, also ruled by Libra, has a lot to do with balance and fairness. And when you have a Mars square to Venus, under the right circumstances, the person could be very engaged and a warrior for equality and fairness and justice and balance. So with astrology, it'll go both ways, right? It could be a test of power, and it could also, you know, be this thing that says, okay, I'm not going to let anybody fuck these people over, right? So I think he has a fairly interesting chart, and particularly the sun in the 12th house. And then he's got a bunch of trines going on with Jupiter and Neptune. He's got a Neptune trine to his ascendant, which I think is quite good. He's got Neptune in Sagittarius, which is exalted. Again, retrograde. It's at the anaretic degree. So when you connect with Vance, you're connecting with a lot of that Neptunian energy. So when he was engaged with Tim Walz, right, there's kind of a calmness. And, you know, when we think of Neptune, which is the ruler of Pisces, right, we think of Neptune as the ocean or the sea. And in this case, it's placid because it's, you know, if anything, like the tide is going out slightly with Neptune at 29 Sagittarius, but it is also in trine with his ascendant. So you're going to get that sort of placid vibe with Vance. Like he's never going to come across aggressive. Even with Venus on his ascendant, you know, it's only 4 degrees off of his ascendant. When he debated Tim Walz, he was very inclusive with Walz. He would say, Tim, I think you would agree with this statement. Or Governor Walz and I are both very concerned about what's happened to the people in, you know, North Carolina, right? And we hope that, you know, like he's very inclusive in that way. And even when he was, you know, tearing down Martha Raddatz, he would say her name, Martha. He didn't say, look, he would say, Martha, I think you would agree with me. Like that's Venus on the ascent. That's like Libra rising. And people that have Libra rising are very polite people. They understand the social code of etiquette. And Vance is that way, right? And not only that, but he's got Neptune trining his Venus. So he comes across as very kind and very empathic and very compassionate. What's interesting is that he's also going to have Saturn going through his 8th house, just like Trump. Only with Vance, it will happen faster. It will happen next year, and it will conjunct his Pallas and his Black Moon Lilith. And Neptune is already there. So it again, it tends to get me leaning even more into this idea that if Trump is elected, Vance is the guy that really emerges. It really becomes the JD Vance presidency or the JD Vance legacy. Very interesting how this is all kind of worked out in terms of his choice. And a lot of people thought, well, there were better choices. And at the time, I was one of them. If you're playing the political game, we're just playing the political game. At the time, I thought there were better choices. But now, actually seeing him in action and spending more time with this chart, this is the guy. He's the most qualified out of any of them. I personally think he's more qualified to be president than Trump, even though Trump was already president. There's something, in a lot of ways, more presidential about Vance than there was about Trump. And I don't think that's much of a stretch. So he's just getting going. He's just getting started. He's just cooking. Remember, next year, that Mars is going to be on his sun, which will be on Trump's Pluto. That's next year. Keep your eye on that. Keep your eye on that transit. And you'll be like, well, when, Robert? You can't leave us hanging. When is it? When is it? When is it? When is that transit? Okay. I hear you. I hear you. And I'm not going to leave you hanging. I hear your voices whispering, not so subtly, through my internet ear. Here we go. Mars retrograde, 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 retrograde. Retrograde, Mars retrograde, and direct here. Right here. May 11th and 12th, that Mars is on Vance's sun and on Trump's Pluto. The sun is in Taurus, within 5 degrees of Algol in Trump's chart. What else do we have? Saturn is at 28 Pisces. Clearly, it's in Vance's 8th house. I believe it's also in Trump's 8th house. And we have Neptune at 1 degree Aries. It is the dawn of a new day with Neptune there. And Chiron at 24. So this is the critical period. If we're looking at a Trump-Vance presidency, it is May 25th. May 25th. So whether or not it's here on May 25th in this year, or what did I say, 2 years? I said within 2 years. Let's go to May 27th, or 2027 rather. Oh, look at that. We go through another Mars retrograde cycle. Look at that. Mars in Virgo goes retrograde at 10 degrees. So in 2026, let's do this. It's right here. Well, that would be right, because it's 2 years. So in 2026, and I said 2 years, right? 2 years. So right here in October 16th, almost 2 years from today, in 2026, there's Mars at 10 degrees Leo, conjunct Vance's sun, conjunct Trump's Pluto, right there. And Jupiter's already in Vance's 12th house, and we know that his ascendant is at 27, right? 27, and oops, where'd it go? 1944. No, where did it go? Where'd it go? Where'd it go? Where'd it go? Shit. All right, hold on. All right, let me just go here. Give me 1 second. I gotta get it back now. Because this is important. Where's Vance's chart? All right, hold on. Okay, so here's Vance's chart. Right here. Right there. Okay, 27 degrees on the ascendant. And in 2025 or 2026, Jupiter hits that ascendant. It'll be on his ascendant. It's exact on his ascendant in December. Okay. Hold on. Where is it? It hits 23. Jupiter hits 23 degrees in Leo a bit later than that in October. And what's interesting is that Mars goes retrograde and it comes back again. Here, I'll show you. Right here, right? The 16th of October. To me, of all the Mars dates in Leo, this one I said 2 years. This is the degree right here. And then we can see Jupiter right here at 22. And at 23, it's conjunct his ascendant. And then it's not that far, hop, skip, and a jump to 26, 27, right here, right? There's Jupiter at 27 in Leo. So I think if we're really looking at this Mars transit for Trump and Vance, it's right here, right there. Because Jupiter's, it's expansive, right? That's what it does. It's like super, super expansive. And it's right there, close to his ascendant, close to Venus. And of course, I'm not wishing anything on anyone, but as an astrologer, kind of have to go there. All right. That's it, boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen. We're out of here for tonight. Thank you for being here. Thank you for showing up, being a part of the show, adding your energy, adding your own interdimensional perspective to what we're going through. I'll be back on Monday or Tuesday with the astro weather and 15 minutes of flame, and we're just going to keep pumping out content here. And mark the 5th on your calendar. We're going to go deep into the night on the 5th of November. I am not going to abandon you this year or this time around. Last time I was not feeling it. I was like, I got to get out of here. We're in it to the end. We are going to be witnesses to
observers, witnesses to history on November 5th, whatever that history may be. All right. Chattaria, you're the best. And once again, just a big shout out to Bree. And we're so happy that you came through and you're on the other side. And there are a lot of people that are going through some real hard times right now, whether it's through Helene or through Milton. People are, people are losing folks. It seems like, whenever we watch the show, it's legacy.com. There are all these people that, were very important parts of our past we're passing on. And it feels like we really are at a time of dying in a lot of ways. Pluto's in those final degrees of Capricorn. It's retrograde in this old age that we've been in. A lot of the characters and the persona that are connected to this old age, well, they're dying too. Right? And whether it's here in the United States or other parts of the world, right? It's time to shed our skin. And when that happens, it's such a vulnerable time.
It's sort of like when, the sea turtles come running up out of the sand, and, they have to get to the water, and, they've got all these predators that are there waiting to snatch them up. And, or when a butterfly emerges from its chrysalis and, hasn't found its wings and it hasn't dried out yet. Those are very vulnerable times. And as a nation, we're kind of in that place, right? We're in a very, very vulnerable place because it does feel like we're in some kind of a birth canal, and that all this and everything that's going around us and swirling around us is a part of it. And I'm not saying that Aquarius is the panacea for everything, but it does represent a new time and a new age, and a very different one than the one that we've been dwelling in. So we're going to see the old world die off, and it's literally happening before our eyes. So I know there's a lot of folks that are going through it, and especially people in the Southeast. I wish we could all just wave a wand and, reverse time. But the other thing about this, and I talked about this on 15 Minutes last week, crisis really brings out the best and worst of people. And I feel like in the Southeast, we've seen the best of people. We have seen what we can do when we put our bodies and our minds and our hearts together. And it's actually really empowering, and it's very inspiring, even though the damage and the death toll and the possibility of these people never reclaiming their land or their homes or their lives the way they once had them, watching fellow Americans respond and come to their aid, en masse, when these government agencies have just completely dropped the ball on purpose. But that's an inspiring story. Let that kindle your heart. Let that be a light for your vision of the future, because guess what? We're going to need more of it, and that time will come, and that's part of our birth process as well. So we're getting our training wheels on here. We're learning how to do it. It's a dress rehearsal, and I think at the end of the day, we'll be a lot better and a lot closer whenever this chapter ends, and it's not that far off. All right. Mods, thank you. Hit like, hit subscribe, stay in the loop, hit the bell. You'll know when we're doing shows. You'll get notified. Join locals and buy me a cup of coffee if you feel like it. All right. Treat each other well. Use your head in order to discern what's real, your heart to step what's possible. I'm Robert Phoenix. You are you. God bless and good night.